Okay. All right. I hope this is working. And also, let's edit this. 2024 full stack dev roadmap. Say this is an education, perhaps. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Hopefully this stream finds you well. Just did a stream on checking out Deno for the first time since they recently announced their version 2.0, which is currently in a release candidate. And I figured that this time around, we could maybe check out what would be good for like a roadmap if you wanted to become a full stack developer. And I came across this here, and I thought we'd just kind of go through it and check it out. So see what I agree with, see what I don't agree with. And ultimately, like, a lot of this stuff is going to be situational. So keep in mind that, one, this is talking about being a web developer, right? You might not want to be a web developer. You might want to be a web developer. You might want to do something very specific in web design, like or web development rather. Perhaps you want to work on enterprise stuff or healthcare stuff or strictly consumer things. Maybe you want to be in a government-facing type of role, and there will be some variation between things that you should learn based on which way you want to go. There will also be a lot of similarities, I think. Welcome. I saw someone just join, so welcome. But let's get into it. And so obviously, I think the big ones that people know are going to be things like React and Angular and Vue, right? But let's see what this post has on here. And also, DevOps roadmap, that might be kind of interesting for a future one too. But let's see what we have here. Okay, so first, where did that just take me? Oh, this took me to courses. I don't want to be there. I clicked on this image. I thought that would take me to a bigger version of the image, but it did not. Okay. So here we go. You'll probably want to learn these things at the very, very minimum, right? Things like Git, SSH, HTTP, HTTPS, the difference between the two, some basic terminal usage. Data structures and algorithms is like the other things on here, kind of just like a generalized computer science or software engineering thing. Actually, there's a really good book if you want to learn data structures and algorithms book. Here's the one. I'll try and find it, the one that I used. I think it was called like a no-nonsense guide. A common sense guide. Here you go. This one right here. This is the book that I read to learn about data structures and algorithms, and I personally thought that it was really good. It made a lot of sense to me, and it was very helpful, I felt. Character encodings, GitHub. Okay, pretty standard, right? Now let's get into the fun stuff. This is what you should learn according to this person, right? So starting off with the basics, we've got HTML, CSS, the basics of JavaScript. And I generally, I wouldn't have any disagreements there, obviously. I would say you can go past the basics of JavaScript. I think, I don't know, maybe just like trying some fun things, like kind of experimenting around and stuff like that, as opposed to just going to like through an entry level tutorial. But anyway, as far as CSS goes, I made a video on this actually before, and the question was, should you use a CSS framework or should you use raw CSS? Like, should you write it yourself? And first and foremost, it always comes down to what you're trying to build and why you're trying to build it and various things of that nature. However, I think just in a nutshell, it's important for you to learn CSS to the extent that you know and understand what is happening. But beyond that, I really do think that if you're not doing anything that is like, incredibly unique or above and beyond what a framework can do, I generally believe that there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. In other words, it's totally fine to use a framework. I would even encourage it, unless you want to be an expert in CSS. If you want to be an expert in CSS and the design side of things, then like by all means. But there are some really great frameworks, Bootstrap, Tailwind, CSS. They can do like most of what you're going to come across in a day-to-day basis. And what you can't do with them, you can certainly just use them, but then also just write your own kind of custom stuff on the side in like a globals file or something like that. So that would be kind of how I would go about it. Let's see, what do we come down here? Package managers. Yeah, okay. For sure. CSS preprocessors. To be honest, here's something interesting. In my career, 6 years thus far, I've not really needed to know about a preprocessor, a CSS preprocessor. Now, I was for a while doing stuff mostly on the back end. However, I did spend quite a bit of time doing stuff on the front end, and I never really came across the need. Now, does that mean you shouldn't do it? No, I think you should still probably learn about it, and arguably I should go back and learn it. But it never really seemed to be that much of a thing that was necessary. And kind of going back to maybe the framework or the library question or point that I was making is that, like, if I wanted to build some sort of application, generally speaking, a library always has me covered. And so I kind of never really came across a need to be using that. Now the CSS frameworks right here, sure, I wouldn't just go jump to that right away, but Bootstrap is maybe one of the most popular ones, if not the most popular. I would add Tailwind into here. I think Tailwind is pretty good. I've been enjoying it. I've been using it recently, and I think it's a pretty good one. I'm not actually familiar with the CSS architectures, so that's kind of interesting and perhaps something to look into. Build tools. Yeah, these are pretty easy. This is just at least the linters and formatters. Like that's a simple one, right? Those are kind of just good environments and setups to be using. Don't really have any disagreements here. I mean, this is like pretty standard, I think. Really where I wanted to kind of get to is when it comes to, picking a framework. So what's interesting, and I don't know if Vue is kind of arrived at this yet, but for React.js, and I don't see, is Next.js on this list? No, it's not. I don't see it. So for React.js, the React documentation now actually recommends that you don't use React.js directly and instead use a framework on top of it. So like Next.js, for example. So with that in mind, I would actually say that you should learn React. It is at the end of the day like the kind of underlying bits of Next.js. But I would actually suggest kind of taking it a step further and really, once you feel generally comfortable with the basics of React, the patterns of React, the general architecture and way that it works, I would say then go maybe switch over to Next.js and kind of go that direction. The other option, if you didn't want to go the Next.js route, and I just say Next.js because it's, I don't know, I think it's like one of the, if not the biggest player in the space of like server-side rendering and stuff, but like, or just React frameworks in general. However, if you didn't want to use that, you could also use Remix. And my next stream that I was planning on, my Tuesday stream for next week that I was thinking about doing would be actually trying Remix for the first time and seeing how that goes. And the reason that I thought that'd be cool is because I've been using Next.js now for about 6 months. I'd used React in the past, but I've been using Next.js for like 6 months or so, and I've found Next.js to be pretty great, and using Vercel for hosting has been pretty great too. But I hear a lot of arguments as to why Next.js isn't the best and why Remix perhaps is a better option. And I think it's always good to try and experiment with things and try new tools and technologies. And so I was kind of thinking that on Tuesday we could check out Remix.js. So that could be cool. Let's see, CSS and JavaScript. So I know that people use this. I've come across people using this, but personally I've never done this, so I can't really comment on that. What I really, really wanted to focus on here is down here. Oh, they do have Next.js. I'm sorry. Server-side rendering they have. So this, I would say, is no longer like a tan color, and actually now should be a yellow because of how, if not for the server-side rendering part, for the fact that React team recommends using a framework, which would be Next.js or Remix, then you should go ahead and learn those things. But server-side rendering is also pretty cool. What I really wanted to focus on here is this ending part right here. And the first is desktop applications, and the second are mobile applications. Now, for both of these, they have something in the JavaScript world. And that's fine, as I'm pretty sure this post here was like really focusing. Actually, it doesn't. It just says front end and back end developer roadmap, but doesn't really specify that it has to be JavaScript. So that's I didn't realize that. So if we come down here, what I think is notable is that they call out Electron and React Native. Now, I have very limited experience with both of them. And I do understand that. I don't know how widely used Electron is still these days. I kind of feel like it sort of peaked and then maybe fell off a little bit, but maybe it's come back. I don't know. React Native, on the other hand, obviously had kind of garnered quite the reputation for being a great technology. However, and I'm not saying that's bad, I'm not saying that you shouldn't use it. I have a project coming up that's going to be using it. But I would actually add Flutter to the list here and say that you should learn Flutter maybe over React Native and maybe over Electron. And the reason I say that is because it has proven to be a really good technology for creating desktop and mobile apps. I've personally published a mobile app using Flutter, and I mean, it worked spectacularly. It really worked really, really well. And I think generally, anyone that uses it will have quite a good experience. And so, yeah, I would actually really suggest like checking out Flutter and seeing how that works and giving that a real shot. I think it'd be really awesome. All right, let's look at the back end stuff. Arguably, I have more experience on the back end. So, and it's a little bit. I think it's probably more blurrier, but regardless, I would actually suggest that you learn to start with either Java, because Java, I think Java is feeling more and more like a legacy language to me, but it's still, code lives for a long time. It's still a great language, and it's still a widely used language. And that whole legacy thing is perhaps just like a me thing and based on my perspective rather than like a reality in the industry. But I would say pick from Java, Python, or Node. I think those are probably the things that will maybe arguably allow you to do the most with them, especially Python, I would say, because you can really you can build all the APIs and everything like that, but then you can also turn around and build, you do stuff with AI if that's what you're interested in. So I think Python would be a really great language to learn. You're going to come across Node regardless, because if you're doing stuff with front end frameworks like React and Angular and all of them, you're going to have Node installed and you're going to be using it like regardless. But I think Java and Python are awesome possibilities to add on to that as well. And then what I would do is interesting that they have Golang and Rust. So maybe .NET can be thrown in there. The only, I don't know, I hear about less people using .NET, I feel like, although I know it's still popular. The Golang and Rust, obviously they're newer languages, but I think most importantly, you think so? PHP? So it's interesting because, I've heard people, this is interesting. I've heard people talk a lot of crap on PHP. However, do you watch the Lex Friedman podcast? Have you ever seen that? I want to show you here something. Lex Friedman podcast. What's that dude's name? Peter Levels? Is that his name? Peter Levels. So this dude here, I don't know if you saw this one, but this guy here, pretty long, almost 4 hours, so I didn't get a chance to finish it. But this guy here was basically talking about how so he's an indie startup guy, has created a bunch of, indie websites that bring in money and, that kind of thing. And he was talking about how he builds his stuff using PHP and jQuery. And I found that fascinating. He's still doing it today. And his reasoning is, one, it works. And so it does what he needs it to do. Two, he knows how to use it really well. So he's not going to go and just try something new just for the hell of it. Like maybe I would, just to kind of make a, video and explore a little bit, But I found that really interesting. And then the other thing too is he was saying, by using just standard, no nonsense technologies like PHP and jQuery, he doesn't have to deal with any crazy hosting. He can spin up just a virtual box on, let's say, DigitalOcean, and just kind of go and just put his application in there, run it, and just let it kind of go, And I found that was really interesting that he was talking about that. So yeah, I mean, and the reason actually that I didn't say PHP is because I just didn't know or don't know to what extent there's support. If you want to do cloud applications, let's say you want to kind of live in the AWS world, but why? But they're not bad things. jQuery is not bad by any means, is it? I would just say, to me, jQuery just feels older, but it doesn't feel bad in any way, really. But I think I can see what you're saying in that. Is it? Don't a lot of older sites still use jQuery though? I feel like they do. I feel like jQuery is actually still. I mean, okay. Point taken in that if if you're going to start a new application, if you're just learning how to code, you're not going to use jQuery. It's just not as sexy as maybe it once was. But certainly there are a lot of sites that still use it, I would think. And it's still a perfectly good technology, especially if you already know it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's true. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So, yeah, I mean, he was just saying how basically he just uses PHP and jQuery. Actually, to take it a step further, guess what database he uses? SQLite, actually, which I did not expect. He was like jQuery, PHP, and SQLite, and I was like, that is such a bare bones setup to be using. I was actually quite amazed. But he had a good point, which was that a lot of these technologies, it's like an open source thing. And then somewhere along the way, they're like, oh, we need to support ourselves and make money. And maybe there was always like a business effort behind the scenes. But what they kind of go to is like let's take Next.js, for example. And this was kind of like, I think this was the example that he was using too. It's like, okay, Next.js is great. It's open source. You can do a lot with it. And then the company behind it, or like the people behind it, are like, oh, we have to make money, or we have to figure out how to like support it or something. So they create this hosting, which is Vercel, and that's like specialized to, whatever it is, and are like, specifically for Next.js, and that's cool. But like now you end up paying a lot more money than you have to, than maybe you could if you just, were willing to kind of start up your own virtual machine and just kind of run it yourself. And I don't know, like I do see it both ways. Like obviously those things can be very expensive, but I would say that I see it both ways in that I can understand why he would want. Yeah, like a lot of it comes down to vendor lock-in, as well as the fact that like Vercel is going to charge you a lot more for something that you could buy. I mean, look, serverless already costs more than just buying the infrastructure outright. And in the case of Vercel, they're even more so adding an additional level of, like a tax, if you will, or a profit margin above just serverless. So if they are using Lambda functions under the hood, they're upcharging you for Lambda functions, which are already upcharging you for compared to, an EC2 instance, which is, I don't know if that's more or less than having a server in your home, but probably depends, would be my guess. But yeah, and like to what extent, if you wanted to build something, let's say you wanted to build a cloud native platform, or you wanted to build a platform, you were going to use AWS, and you wanted to do it using a cloud native architecture, and you're going to need to interface with a lot of different AWS services as a result of that. What degree of support does AWS have for PHP versus Node or Java or Python, or perhaps .NET? Like that's the question that I would have, and that's why I originally didn't put PHP in the list of things that I think you should really be picking from when you're considering a backend language. What do you think about that? Yeah, okay. I mean, fair enough. Like if you're going to use Docker, I think you can, and you're not talking about the support that AWS has. You're No, yeah. But I think that's a little bit different. Like you can deploy whatever stack you want, um, to AWS. Like even with Lambda functions, uh, Lambda functions, supported languages, you can send whatever you want, right? However, PHP is not listed here, so that's interesting. Didn't see that coming. But I believe you can also. I think you can deploy a Docker container to a Lambda function. I could be wrong. I thought you could. Docker is not mentioned here. Deprecated runtimes. No. Can you do that actually? Now I'm kind of curious. Lambda function PHP. No, that's not different. That's not the same thing. Oh, so you can use a custom runtime, it looks like. You can implement AWS Lambda runtime in any programming language. Okay, so there we go. I mean, it seems to be promising, right? That we'd be able to do that. Runtime is a program that runs. A couple years ago, maybe it was deployed to Alibaba's. Oh, wow. I feel like where are you from? Where are you from? Are you in the U.S. or elsewhere? Switzerland. Sweet. Is like okay, so in Switzerland, in the dev community there, when you're going to, work on a project, push it up somewhere, like where is the most prominent cloud provider that people think of pushing something or deploying something to? Is it not AWS? Like, is it otherwise? Maybe AWS. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Because it's I would say it's definitely AWS for us too here in the US. And then actually you would maybe, depending on what you're doing, you might think about I think Azure is number two. Like, but I think Azure is number two mostly because of how prominent Microsoft products are in business here. Um, and people generally do have a concern about like, hey man, how's it going? Where Kadir 11, where are you from? Um, yeah, I think people also have like a concern with GCP just like killing products too. But according to AWS, here I guess this is a list of their supported languages for India. Cool, nice, welcome. Supported languages for SDK. So PHP is one of them. Um, the one that I used the most was probably Go in the past or Node. Maybe Python. I can't remember though. But certainly Go and Node. I also find that the SDKs for these cloud platforms have varying degrees of support. We're just talking about different technologies and what you'd want to, what the roadmap should be if you're getting started with full stack development. Right now, we're talking about I think we got on a little bit of a tangent. We were talking about PHP. Or before that, we were talking about like which languages, back-end languages made the most sense to start with. And I made the argument that Java, Node, and Python are the ones that you should be picking from. And Muse brought up a good point that PHP is a solid language to also consider. And we were just kind of talking about that. But yeah, so I was saying that like what I find is that the SDKs for these cloud providers, depending on which product you want to use, like Lambda functions versus like Elastic Beanstalk versus let's say EC2 or whatever, like they all have varying degrees of support. And actually, here's a pretty good example I'll give you. AWS, this might have changed since the last time I used it, but AWS CDK SDK. So let's do this here maybe. So CDK, Cloud Development Kit, they support. Oh, I didn't go with either of those two. I went with Node and then kind of found my way in Go. later on, and then ended up going to, well, I guess now I'm back in Node really. But CDK, they actually like they support technically Go, Python, a bunch of these, but the best support. No, hey, it's funny you mentioned that because I actually had like oh after watching that guy's video, the interview with with Peter Levels, I actually wanted to try and build something in Laravel. I thought that could be kind of cool. So maybe I'll get there eventually. That would be kind of interesting because I don't really know PHP. So that I think would, I don't know, maybe that would be cooler than doing something like making content on like Remix or something. I don't know. But anyway, TBD on that one. But yeah, like the real quick, the point I wanted to make here about like CDK is that they technically support things like Go, .NET, Java, Python, but the vast majority, when I was using this, of their examples are in TypeScript. And they have by far, when I was using it again, the best support for TypeScript. And so like, yeah, you can use various languages, but I do think that in a world where so much is dependent on the cloud, you kind of have to take that into consideration if and only if your intention is to depend on cloud services. Like in your case where you're just deploying a Docker container with a Laravel application, I'm assuming that you weren't really relying on, AWS services maybe as much, and so it didn't really matter. So it really just depends, I think. I think we were here. Okay. I know Go and Rust have gotten a lot of love in recent years as well. I was a Go developer for 3 years. I've heard great things about Rust. So I don't really know too much about Rust to be able to say one way or another, but I know that a lot of like engineering purists, I think, prefer Rust over Go, which I find interesting because I thought Go was really nice, and it had gotten a lot of love for a long time. These other ones like Elixir, Scala, Erlang, Clojure, Hexel, I think they're more like specialized languages, are they not? That's always been my understanding is specifically like Elixir and Erlang. Like I think that was created by telephone companies like many years ago because computers couldn't handle the throughput of real time at the scale that they needed to, and so they created them to handle that. Package standard library best practices. Yeah, I mean this is just like general. Learn relational databases. So I don't know that like between I don't know that I would agree that you have to learn more than one relational database. Like I feel like Postgres and or MySQL is I think Postgres is more complex or like it's more powerful. That's been my experience. And so I think you can maybe just learn that one and then kind of go from there. Like, I don't know that for your average developer, unless you want to be a DBA, for your average developer, I feel like there's not going to be a ton of difference in terms of your day-to-day if you learn Postgres and then years later need to go and work with MySQL for something. I think you'd kind of just be okay. So I don't know. I feel like I would probably just focus on Postgres there, to be honest. Hey, speaking of Laravel and PHP, learning a framework here, this article, this image here calls out for PHP, Laravel, and Symfony. I don't know if you've used Symfony. I've actually never even heard of it, I feel like. For Node, Express, yeah, if you want to build like APIs and stuff. For Go, when I was working with Go, we did use a framework. We used, for our APIs, it was called Twerp, which is a API framework I believe it was created by Twitch. But oh, really? 100% Symphony. Why is that? Is it now like, oh, interesting. Why are you 100% on Symphony? Like what got you there? Oh, fair enough. Yeah. Changing jobs yeah, that's reasonable. That happens all the time. Hey, you know what? I mean, maybe you're probably looking specifically for something that was still going to do PHP work, but a lot of times you switch jobs and they use different stack. Like I've had that happen to me. So that's normal too, I would say. But yeah, for Go, we did use a framework. I don't think there's anything wrong with using frameworks in Go, although to each their own, and certainly various languages have their own kind of standards or best practices or maybe cultural norms or something like that. But we did, and I know there are a number of like specifically, API frameworks or web frameworks for Go that are really good. Like I think Jin, I think it was called, is like a really good one. There was a few others, I can't remember their names though. Okay, when it comes to NoSQL, MongoDB. Yeah, I think that, I'd argue it's like the most powerful of the document databases. But the thing with the thing with like NoSQL is that it's just, they become very use case specific at a certain point. So you have MongoDB that tries to be like, change it back to Laravel. So I'm actually a front end dev, but was forced to. Oh wow, interesting. Does Laravel do front end too? Is it like a Django in that it does front end as well, or do you still need like a React or an Angular component with Laravel? So they're like two different applications. Also, I want to call out that like, oh, you know what? We should play around with Next.js. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I think Django is the same way. I didn't use Django for a very long time. When I first got into programming and I was using Python, and it was like a full stack. It was actually some course on Udemy. Full stack development with Python and Django, and it was a really good. It was really cool to do that, and I think you can run it in like a headless mode or something like that. Um, but I didn't actually get that far. I ended up going to Node and just going down that kind of rabbit hole, and then like completely switching away from Python. But yeah, I would love to maybe make a video or two exploring Nginx. Hey, yo, Dakachi? Did I say that right? How's it going? Where are you from? Yeah, Django was cool. Django is pretty cool. Although a lot of people use, oh man, what's it called? I'm blanking. Canada, nice. We're in Canada. Are you a big hockey fan? Are you getting ready for the season? Who's your team? Oh, Switzerland too has good hockey as well, don't they? No, not a hockey fan. Oh, never mind then. This is awkward. Okay, never mind then. I'm a big hockey fan, so that's why I asked. Um, okay, gotcha. Yeah, cool. Um, yeah, I think it'd be cool to do some videos on Nginx as well. What was the one I was thinking? Flask. That's the one I was thinking of. That one I feel like when I first started learning web development, it was like Django was huge. And actually, the reason I started learning Django was because this guy that I had met that I knew from like when I was a kid became a software developer, and he just mentioned that he was doing Django. And so when I tried to learn how to code and then saw that you could use, like, I came across that Django thing and was reminded of him telling me about it a few years prior. And that was the only reason that I went and started learning Django, because I just didn't know where to start. Nice. What do you like? Do you know anything about what you want to do? Or actually, I mean, I would encourage you to go back and watch this stream. We talked about a lot of interesting things here. Um, but I think these types of infographics are really helpful for people. Full stack software development. Yeah. Oh, so not necessarily web development then, like potentially mobile apps and stuff. Yeah, that's cool. Have have you guys ever used like a graph database? I would suggest not really. Or you want to major in web development? Okay. I would recommend like you know checking out a graph database like Neo4j or something like that. They're really cool. Another one I think is called dgraph, although I didn't have a great experience with that. I had a really good experience with Nginx. Sorry, not Nginx. I don't know why I said that. Neo4j, I had a really good experience with. Um, and it's like it is open source. You can just kind of go and use it. You don't have to pay for it like various AWS and GCP databases. Um, but it's really powerful, and I had a really great experience with it. To be honest, I think it's really fun. There, okay, so yeah, it's like you get to a point where you're kind of doing stuff with NoSQL. It's like it becomes very situational and like use case specific, and that's the case with graph databases. Like it is a bit use case specific there at that point. Um, However, in saying that, they are really cool if you ever come across the need to. MySQL does a job for me. I mean, you can, yeah, and you can accomplish. I mean, that's the great thing, right? Is like if you can get your data into some sort of a like defined data model. I think that like that's what I use too. I use Postgres mostly. Um, I see a world in which I'll need to use something like Firestore or Neo4j. Firestore perhaps more a little bit sooner than Neo4j, but like Postgres is a great database. I think it's like well defined how good Postgres is, right? Yeah, it is. I think pretty solid, to be honest. What else is on here? I remember using Kafka a little bit, but like very very minimally. That's like one of those kind of cloud native things. So if like building something a distributed system on the cloud, I think you kind of get to the event stream pretty quickly there. Like an ERD entity relationship diagram. Is that what you're talking about? Whoops. What do you need help with? What's not clear? ZVA Creation. Hey, how you doing? Where are you from? Welcome. Yeah, let me know, Dakachi, what you need help with, and we can try and talk about. I do have to hop off in a few minutes here, but we can see what it is. How do you create them more efficiently and understanding the major keys in the entity? Hello, ZVA Creation, India. Nice, welcome. How's it going? Hope you're having a good day. Okay, how to create them more efficiently and understanding the major keys in the entity. What do you mean the major keys? Let's take a look at one. Let's take a look at this one here that I have for a project that that's the wrong document. For a project that I've been kind of working on and actually streaming live. I've been streaming, building live. Hey, how's it going? I've been streaming live, like building this thing, right? Candidate keys. I don't know what that is. Let's see. ERD candidate. Let's see. A candidate key is a minimal super key that uniquely identifies the entity. Oh, is that just like the primary key? Simple or composite key that is unique and minimal. It is unique because no two rows in the primary key is a candidate key that is selected by the database designer to be used as an identifying mechanism for the whole entity set. It must uniquely identify tuple. Okay, that one I know. Is unique because no two rows in the table may have the same value at any time. It is minimal. All right, well, let's see then. Candidate versus types of All right, let's take a look. A candidate key can be any column or combination of columns that can qualify as a unique key in the database. There can be multiple candidate keys in one table. Each candidate key can qualify as a primary key that uniquely identifies a record. They seem like they're completely different things. Like, they seem like they're trying to accomplish different things. Or can Muse, can you give an example by any chance of when a candidate key would be useful? Because it seems to me like a primary key accomplishes the job of a candidate key. And I would also say, like, in my personal experience, I've never heard the term candidate key in doing data modeling. It was always only primary key when it came to uniqueness within a table. Yeah, that's it. Well, here's a longer one. Let's see if this is good. Additional points. A primary key is always one of the candidate keys. Fairly often, It's the only candidate key. A table with no candidate keys does not represent a relation. If you're using the relational model to help you build a good database, then every table you design will have at least one candidate key. The relational model would be complete without the concept of the primary key. It wasn't in the original presentation of the relational model. Okay, here's another one. This person says, there is no difference between the two. A primary key is a candidate key. By convention, one candidate key in a relation is usually chosen to be the primary one, but the choice is essentially arbitrary and a matter of convenience for database users, designers, and developers. It doesn't make a primary key fundamentally any different to any other candidate key. So, wait. Okay. I think I'm understanding this a bit, but having said that, I could be completely wrong. So one thing that helps me to learn a lot is actually like thinking about the semantic reasoning behind why something is named something. And that helps me to kind of put together a mental model of how everything fits together. So in this case, what I'm guessing, because it seems as though there is ultimately very little or no difference, other than a candidate is something that could potentially fulfill the role of whatever it is you're trying to fulfill the role of. So if we need to fulfill the role of a primary key, then perhaps we can take all of the candidate keys and they are all candidates for, yes, exactly what Muse just said. You just said it much faster than what I just said. So a candidate key is a potential primary key, and they're called such because they're all candidates for a primary key, to be the primary key. That's my guess. Takachi, does that make sense? Well, hopefully that helped out. Yeah, I that's just a guess, I think. It seems to make, it kind of adds up, I think, right? Yeah, but I think that, like, the only constraint on whether or not something is a candidate key is that it has to be unique. But since multiple things can be unique, they're then candidates for it to be a primary key, and that's how they get the name. Like, for example, you might have a unique constraint on an ID of some kind, as well as an email address, right? And then you might have some sort of composite constraint on some combination of columns, and I think you can have composite primary keys as well, right? I think it's been a while since I've done like in detail data modeling, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, hopefully that made sense. All right, I do have to. Yeah, no problem. Hopefully that was good. Hopefully that helped out. I do have to hop off though. Unfortunately, I gotta go do some work. So it was great talking to you guys. Thanks for sticking around and hanging out. And hope you have a great weekend. I do the streams like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then sometimes Tuesdays and sometimes Thursdays. So if you're ever free, feel free to stop by and check it out. Hope to see you guys soon. Take care. See ya.